My name is Kalia Whitmore, and I'm 19 years old. 4 months ago, I left Dallas, Texas to begin medical school in New York City. I thought getting accepted would be the hardest part. I was wrong. Tuition was covered. That was the deal. Everything else, rent, groceries, transport, books, was my responsibility. That's what my mother told me when I asked if they could spare even a little extra help. My father is a surgeon. He's rarely home. My mother handles the money. And according to her, there wasn't a single cent to spare. So I worked, tutor in the mornings, event staff on Saturdays, bartender on Fridays. I rotated shifts like a machine programmed not to break. But machines don't feel dizzy carrying trays of drinks. Machines don't skip meals to pay rent. I did. I lived on instant noodles and stale bread. I biked everywhere to avoid subway fares. In lecture halls, I fought sleep like it was a second curriculum. I stopped joining classmates for coffee because $5 felt like a luxury. And every night, before collapsing into bed, I'd scroll through my sister's Instagram. Isabella, 21, fashion design student in Paris. Her life looked like a magazine spread. Rooftop parties near the Eiffel Tower, designer bags, weekend trips to Monaco. One post showed her twirling in a Dior dress, captioned, "Mom always knows exactly what I need. Hash blessed." I stared at that caption for a long time, because when I called Mom for help, she'd said, "We're barely managing with just your tuition, Kalia. Barely managing." The collapse happened on a Friday night. The bar was packed. I remember the tray in my hands shaking, the room tilting. I reached for the counter. Then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The doctor said exhaustion, malnutrition, overwork. My supervisor had called my parents. That night, a male friend from school, Ethan, came over with groceries. He cooked pasta in my tiny kitchen while I sat wrapped in a blanket. "You're telling me your dad's a surgeon," he said carefully, "and you're fainting because you can't afford groceries?" They said money's tight. "You have a sister in Paris, right?" I nodded. How is she surviving over there if money's tight? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. So I called Isabella. She sounded radiant, effortless. "Oh, Mom just sent me the cutest Chanel bag for my birthday next month." My stomach tightened. "How are you managing financially?" "Oh, Mom transfers me about $3,000 a month. More if I need something special. Paris is expensive, you know." $3,000 every month. I ended the call politely. Then I stared at the wall for a long time. I wasn't being taught independence. I was being deprived. The holidays were approaching. I booked the cheapest flight home I could find. One night, one day. That was all I could afford. When I arrived, my father opened the door and froze. "Kalia, you've lost so much weight." At lunch, he asked gently, "Are you eating properly?" I decided not to lie anymore. "Mostly ramen, sometimes bread." He looked confused. "Is the money I've been sending not enough?" Silence swallowed the table. "What money?" I asked. "I've been transferring $2,000 a month for you." I turned slowly toward my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Paisley," Dad said sharply, "you have been sending Kalia the money, haven't you?" She whispered, "No." The air left my lungs. "I've been keeping it for Isabella," she continued. "She needs it more." My father went pale. "You let our daughter collapse from overwork while sending $5,000 or $6,000 a month to Paris?" "She has potential," Mom insisted. "Kalia will be fine. She's like you." "Like you." Capable, self-sufficient, disposable. Dad's voice trembled with controlled fury. "From now on, I handle the finances." But that wasn't the worst part. Later that night, he knocked on my bedroom door. "There's more," he said quietly. "Your mother has been diverting money from the family trust, nearly $300,000, into a separate account for Isabella." The world felt unreal. 300,000, while I counted coins for subway fare. He had frozen the account. Legal action would follow. Downstairs, I could hear them arguing. Years of imbalance cracking open in one violent night. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing something devastating. It wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about worth. And for the first time in my life, the illusion was breaking. The next morning, the house felt like it had survived a storm. No one said it out loud, but everything had shifted. Dad barely touched his coffee. Mom moved around the kitchen like a ghost, eyes swollen, jaw tight. I felt strangely calm, like I had finally stepped out of a fog I didn't know I was living in. Before I left for the airport, Dad transferred $5,000 into my account. "Back pay," he said quietly. "For the months you should have had support." His eyes were heavy with guilt. "I promise you, Kalia, this changes now." I wanted to believe him. I returned to New York with a mixture of relief and grief. Relief that I wouldn't have to starve anymore. Grief that my entire childhood suddenly made sense. That night, Isabella called. She didn't greet me. "What did you say to Dad?" she demanded. "The truth. You made it sound like I'm some kind of villain." I sat on my bed, staring at the city lights outside my window. "Did you know I collapsed at work?" Silence. "What?" I fainted in the middle of a shift because I was exhausted and underfed. Another pause, longer this time. I didn't know it was that bad." "Would it have mattered if you did?" She exhaled sharply. "Dad cut my allowance, 1,000 a month. I can't live on that in Paris." "I couldn't live on zero in New York," I said evenly. "You don't understand fashion school. I have to look the part. And I don't have to look like a functioning human in medical school." My voice cracked despite my effort to stay steady. I was working 60-hour weeks on top of classes. She hung up on me. For the first time in our lives, she had to feel what I'd felt. Unstable. Back in Dallas, things were unraveling fast. Dad called a week later. "I've filed for divorce." I closed my eyes. Even though I'd sensed it coming, hearing the words still felt like glass shattering. "She kept sending Isabella extra money," he continued, "even after everything. From a joint account I thought we'd agreed to freeze." "So that was it?" I asked softly. "That was it." The legal process was ugly. Mom contested everything, claimed Dad was overreacting, claimed she was only trying to invest in Isabella's future. But when Dad's lawyer presented the financial records, diverted trust funds, hidden transfers, drained joint savings, the judge was not sympathetic. The divorce settlement overwhelmingly favored Dad. Mom moved into a small condominium across town. For a while, Isabella threatened to drop out of fashion school in protest. "She can't do this to me," she texted once. "Mom always believed in me." But something unexpected happened. Instead of coming home, Isabella stayed in Paris. She got a part-time job at a small boutique near her campus. At first, she complained constantly. I'm folding scarves for tourists, Kalia. This is humiliating." "Welcome to retail," I replied. But a few months later, her tone changed. "My boss is teaching me inventory management," she admitted during one of our calls, "and sourcing materials. It's actually interesting." Meanwhile, my life stabilized. With regular support finally coming directly from Dad, I cut my bar shifts down to weekends. I quit event staffing entirely. I kept tutoring because I loved it, but I wasn't drowning anymore. I bought groceries without calculating every cent. Real groceries. Fresh vegetables, chicken, fruit. The first time I cooked a proper meal in my apartment, I almost cried. It was just pasta with sautéed spinach and grilled chicken. Simple, ordinary. But it tasted like dignity. My grades improved within weeks. I slept more. I joined the pre-med association I'd been too exhausted to consider before. Dad and I talked every Sunday. "I should have paid closer attention," he would say sometimes. "You were busy saving lives," I'd answer. That's not an excuse to neglect my own daughter. Daughter. It still felt new hearing him say it with such softness. Mom struggled the most. After 20 years of being a stay-at-home mother in a large house in an elite neighborhood, she now worked part-time at a department store. She complained constantly at first. The hours, the customers, the manager. But beneath the resentment, I sensed something else. Humility. Our conversations were strained, brief, polite. "You've turned Isabella against me," she accused once. "I didn't turn anyone," I replied quietly. The truth did. Months passed. Isabella and I started talking more regularly. Not about money, but about life. "I never realized how much Mom's favoritism hurt you," she said one evening over video call. Her apartment behind her looked smaller than before. Simpler. "I never realized how much it trapped you," I answered. She hesitated. It felt good being the special one. It felt normal being the overlooked one. We both laughed, but there was sadness in it. Slowly, without Mom's shadow dictating our dynamic, we began building something real. A sisterhood not based on hierarchy, but on honesty. Still, Mom wasn't done blaming me. "You exposed private family matters," she said during one tense call. "You broke this family." I looked at my reflection in the darkened laptop screen. "No," I said calmly. "The secrecy did." Silence followed. For the first time, she had no rebuttal. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. A year after the night everything exploded at that holiday lunch table, my life barely resembled the one I had been surviving before. I was no longer the girl counting coins for subway fare or pretending ramen was enough. I was thriving. Medical school felt different when I wasn't constantly exhausted. I ranked near the top of my class. I joined research projects. I even had time to sit in cafes with classmates without calculating whether $5 would ruin my week. Dad visited every few months. He looked lighter now, less tense. Divorce suited him in a strange way. During one visit, we walked through Central Park, leaves crunching beneath our shoes. I didn't realize how much I'd checked out, he admitted. I told myself I was providing for my family by working harder, but I wasn't present. You're here now, I said. He squeezed my shoulder gently, and I'm not going anywhere. Isabella changed too, more than I expected. Instead of collapsing under the weight of a reduced allowance, she adapted. The boutique job evolved into something more serious. She learned about sourcing fabrics on a budget, negotiating with suppliers, tracking margins. One of my professors said constraints make better designers, she told me during a video call. When you don't have unlimited money, you have to actually think. I smiled. Who knew budget limitations could be inspiring? Certainly not the old me, she laughed. Then came the surprise. 3 years after my collapse, Isabella launched her own small independent fashion line in Paris. Minimalist pieces, elegant but practical, designed with affordability in mind. When she sent me the invitation to her first runway presentation, I cried. What shocked me most wasn't the success. It was the front row. Dad was sitting there, beaming. After years of being Mom's carefully curated project, Isabella had built something without manipulation or excess, and she and Dad had formed their own relationship, one based on mutual respect instead of silent competition for approval. As for Mom, the divorce humbled her in ways none of us anticipated. She didn't walk away with the life she'd imagined. The court didn't overlook the diverted trust funds or the secret transfers. Her financial advantage disappeared overnight. But something shifted last year. Her department store promoted her to assistant manager. She called me that night, crying. I'm proud of you, Kalia. The words felt foreign. She continued, voice shaking. I was wrong. I thought I was protecting Isabella. I didn't see what I was doing to you. Therapy helped her uncover something painful. She had grown up as the overlooked sibling. Her own mother had favored her older sister relentlessly. She had unconsciously recreated the same dynamic, but reversed. Understanding it didn't erase the damage, but it made it human. Our relationship is still fragile. Some conversations are stiff, some apologies incomplete, but they are real. 6 months ago, Dad called me with a tone I hadn't heard in years. Light, almost boyish. I've met someone. Her name is Marin, a pediatric nurse at his hospital. Warm, direct, unimpressed by his surgical prestige. Watching him fall in love again at 52 was unexpectedly healing. When he told me he was proposing, I didn't hesitate. She's lucky to have you, I said. This will be our first Christmas together, he told me recently. All of us. All of us. Isabella flying in from Paris, me from New York, Dad, Marin, and Mom. Yes, she's invited. It won't be perfect. Family never is. But it will be honest. Sometimes I think about that night at the bar, the dizziness, the tray slipping from my hands, the humiliation of waking up in a hospital bed because I hadn't eaten properly in days. At the time, it felt like my body had betrayed me. Now I see it differently. My body forced the truth to the surface. Without that collapse, I might still be starving quietly while someone else paraded through life funded by secrecy. Instead, everything was dismantled. The marriage, the illusion, the favoritism, and in the rubble, something sturdier formed. Dad learned to be present. Isabella learned independence. Mom learned accountability. And I learned something I should have known all along. My worth was never tied to how little I needed. It was never measured by how much I could endure in silence. 3 years later, I'm in my 4th year of medical school, preparing for residency interviews. Near the top of my class, surrounded by friends, supported openly. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like the reliable one or the low-maintenance daughter. I feel seen, not as the overlooked child, not as the comparison, but as Kalia Whitmore, a future doctor, a sister, a daughter, a woman who survived the collapse that almost broke her and discovered that sometimes you have to completely dismantle something before you can rebuild it into something honest.